your official title is Digital Outreach Minister.
Yep.
And so just talk to us a little bit about what that is and maybe how you settled on that. How did you come from shaping young minds?
Yeah.
Or mind, at least me.
Yeah.
And how did you go from that to being the Digital Outreach Minister?
The short answer is it's a God thing, but the longer answer is when I transitioned out of student, I'd always ask God, like, what do you want me to do next? And that's a very dangerous question, I think, if you ever asked it with any sort of honesty. And at the time, since I'd been doing student ministry and they still thought I was cool, which I had them fooled up until I was 40 years old. And the Hope asked me to do the social media, kind of as a soft transition while we were looking for somebody to take over student. So I was babysitting Hope's social media on Facebook at the time, barely into Instagram. So, they called me a social media expert. I just knew Facebook. That's all I knew. That was just, and funny part was, anybody that tells you they're a social media expert is lying to you because it's a rapidly changing thing. But that's what I did for Hope for a while. And in the midst of that, we were streaming our weekend service, not very with any sort of purpose. We just could. But we were one of the early churches, at least in the Midwest, that was doing that, which was kind of fascinating. And the numbers of people that were watching was not huge. But I kind of was curious as to who they were. Why were these people tuning in to a church in West Des Moines when they could be maybe going to a church locally or doing something else? And so I was just curious who these people are, because the thing that attracted me to Hope, was the core value: lost people matter to God, so they matter to us. And I really wanted to know who these people were. I was not okay with them just being online and anonymous. So we tried to figure out ways we could get to know them, and that happened through one very bold and silly idea on an Ash Wednesday service. And I came to town how many years ago now? It's more than 10. We wanted to at least say hi to folks. And I remember that season, right up at Ash Wednesday, was about the time that the Oscars were happening. And I'm not a big fan of award shows, but for whatever reason, I watched them because I'm married. And there was a cutaway at one point in time. And they went from the main stage to the host on the side. And the host would say, when we come back, we're going to hear from so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I was just sitting there watching it, and I wasn't even caring about the Oscars anymore. What I saw was a moment where God spoke and said, what if you did that? I thought, okay, why not? And so I reached out to our IT team and I said, can we put a web camera up and can we somehow connect that to the stream so that I can say hi to people? I'm like, all right. And so then I asked Hope, would it be okay if I tried this with our online stream? And they said, sure, you can do Ash Wednesday at noon, which is probably the least likely for, if I'm going to break something, it's not going to break much. Because if there were 150 people worshiping with us on a weekend, there were maybe 20 to 25 that would worship with us on those special service types. So we did. We set up a camera in the upstairs room above the worship center, and I just remember Peter Eschenbrenner, who was on our IT team at the time, was sitting there with me. He had somehow finagled this, and he just at one point said, we're going to go in 3, 2, 1, and he pointed. And I remember just saying very vividly, hi, my name is Mark Bradt. We're so glad you're here joining us for worship here at Hope. We believe it's no accident. We've been praying for you. Just kept it really simple, like we would say in the moment. And I got 2 emails within the next half hour from people who had worshiped online that were so thrilled finally that somebody knew they were there. And that opened a door to kind of a longer version of where we get to now with what I do.
And so I think a lot of people who kind of either have worshiped online or have found their way here in the room, or we do record this, so this is a thing that people watch online as well. So
nice.
Hi to all of you. There's our camera.
Yep.
There they are. But a lot of people who maybe are new to Hope would be surprised that we were filming that early. They might think, well, obviously this started during COVID. But
right.
What you're saying is this was a while before COVID happened.
2013, 2014 is my best guess, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And so we kind of had the infrastructure in place. What I'm hearing you say is we had the infrastructure in place. So one of the reasons why we jumped on streaming so fast for kind of the COVID time period and during that crazy season of life was because we already had kind of figured some of those things out. We already had those things in place. But we've placed a heavy focus on coming back in person. And shout out to Bob Good's group, who is a faithful
Yes.
online group. I know you know Bob.
Dr. Robert Good.
Dr. Robert
Yep.
Good. And Dr. Robert's group is made up of guys from all across the Midwest, and they have guys in North Carolina as well. And it's just pretty nuts, the amount of people that are worshiping with us online, just illustrating the point, even for Men of Hope. But my point is we've made a focus for, if you are local, please get here in person if you can.
Yep.
And we are still we're still streaming online.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And so talk to me a little bit about that. Is online ministry still relevant on this side of COVID? Or talk about kind of that balance of what we're doing, because you're in the thick of thinking about that for Hope.
I'd say 100% relative, although it's changed. So in the early years of online ministry, if you think about it like a pendulum, the online folks swung really hard to this area of online is it. And this is before we really knew a lot about online ministry. We just thought, here's a new space we can play in. It's almost like when a new restaurant pops up and everybody goes there for a solid week, and then after a week you realize it's just Steak and Shake. I mean, I've had this before. I don't know why it's so important to have it now. Which, by the way, Steak and Shake is really amazing. And I'm glad that it's not the most popular restaurant in town anymore. But everybody was over here in the online sphere just focusing online, thinking if we can just build this online presence, build it. And then this thing happened. They had so many people online now asking, we want something more. We need something more than just joining you on Sunday at 9:30, joining you on Sunday at 10:30. There were people that were worshiping with 5 or 6 different churches because they were just online ministry junkies. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm glad people were able to connect to us in a meaningful way online. But something needed to change. And over time, that pendulum started to swing back to, what can we do with folks once they become they consider us their church home? Then I think it becomes our responsibility to figure out what we can do with them to bring the good news to them where God finds them. And I think that's what really started to change the game for Hope and for me. Is wondering with those folks, how can we get you connected? Because anybody that does online ministry can tell you, it's no different than if you have, connected with relatives before over FaceTime or any sort of streaming platform. It's not the same. If you have grandkids and you FaceTime with them and they're in North Carolina, it's not the same as being in the living room with them and getting to pick them up and hold them and hug them and all that kind of stuff. At some point in time, we long for this connection like what you're doing here this morning. And that matters. So we tried to figure out ways to move people from online to offline. And that became the next thing that everybody was kind of looking for in online ministry. And the fun part was, at the time, there weren't a lot of people around the country doing what we did. So that pool of folks we could kind of borrow ideas from was very, very small. But it was all churches that you would know. And whenever we would get together and talk, and we would, it would always be, well, what are you doing that's working? It wasn't like we were sharing best practices. We were just trying to borrow from everybody else that was trying things out and figure out what worked the best. It was kind of a wild, wild west mentality in a very cool way, but with responsibility and knowing that this is, a ministry that God had called us to. So, that was 2013, 2014 where this whole journey began. And then we started to figure out how we can move people offline.
And as you also realized, this is the Des Moines area, so you recognize things kind of needed to change. And the Des Moines area is categorized as such, where there is central Iowa and there's kind of the metro area. And we have a lot of really close communities, small towns, right, that are indeed small towns, but they're pretty darn close to Des Moines. And they're also, or even kind of farther away, but everybody has a connection to Des Moines, or a lot of people know somebody. This is just the makeup of Iowa and how that works. And kind of as you then progressed through realizing that something needed to change and that people needed to have some touch points, not just online, but you realized that there were a lot of people worshiping online, maybe in the same areas. And you see what I'm getting at. It kind of led to the next thing and another major thing that you do here at Hope as well. Yeah,
so as you can imagine, over time, people would get a little discontent with worshiping on their couch. If you've ever had to go through a season, which we all did, and it was so funny, during COVID, all of us in online ministry we really quickly became get off my lawn guys, because we were all like trying to figure this out. and we started to kind of get some footholds, with the people that were wanting to worship with us online, then everybody was online. And it was people that were like in their buildings, on a regular basis. And I'm like, you know what? We like you and all, but we like hanging out with the people that were here because they had to be here. Now everybody was here. So it was just an interesting season for online ministry people. But even before that, some folks who had been worshiping online with us, one city in particular, Forest City, and I had worked in Forest City just out of college, so I had some relationships with the people there, reached out and said, would it be okay if we just got some people together and worshiped with Hope online? Sure. I didn't have a reason to say no. I didn't know what it was. There was no plan. It just sort of was, they instigated, they reached out and said, can we get together? And in my knowledge of the city, I remember, and I was just there 3 days ago, they had the community center in the YMCA that had a room that had a screen and had a projector. I thought, well, this is simple. Just see if you can borrow that space on a Sunday morning, turn on the stream and gather together, set up some chairs. Why not? They did. November of 2015 was when they started. Just 24, 25 people in that neck of the woods just got together at the YMCA on a Sunday morning. The YMCA wasn't even charging us at the time because they didn't even know what this was. We just had to happen to have somebody in leadership that worked at the Y, so we got the room for free. And that started this journey. We didn't call it a local site at the time. It just was a group of folks that were getting together. In fact, we didn't even speak their name out loud for the longest time. I tried to get, our pastors to, when they're preaching, to say hi to Forest City. But at the time, we were also a part of a bigger family that was very guarded in how you did this sort of a thing, which was kind of funny. Don't we want to reach people with the good news? Yes. But there was some rules, and we were breaking the rules. But we weren't telling them we were breaking the rules yet, because when they found out we were breaking the rules, I didn't want to have that conversation. So we just sort of let this kind of percolate on its own for a period of time. And then another gentleman, we started to get some prayer requests online, which is a great next kind of connection point for folks. And there's a gentleman from Ames, his name is John Hill, who had reached out in a little connection card and said that he was having a surgery on his knee, I think it was at the time, and he was saying that he was so thankful that we had an online ministry because he could continue to worship, because they were driving to Ankeny at the time. We had our campus there. But since he was going to be laid up, they could worship online. It's like, so I reached out and said, hey, John, I'll be praying for you after service. And he wrote me back and said, well, have you ever thought about bringing Hope to Ames? And now the best kept secret is out. Now this site in Forest City, which we didn't really know what it was yet, that knowledge had circulated enough within Hope that somebody else asked about doing this. And now I sort of had to get some ducks in a row, if I could, so that I could figure out what this truly was. And so that launched then what we now call our local site ministry, which is essentially allowing people to be church together without all the infrastructure, without all the overhead, without having to hire staff, without having to do HR. It literally is just having a Super Bowl party with your best friends every single Sunday at 9:30 a.m. And you gather in a space where you can meet and stream and make connection meaningfully and have community together. So that's, in an overarching way, how this all began. So that was Forest City and Ames were our first two. Over time then, Kansas City started to get going. Now we were no longer just in Iowa, we were in another state, which was another wonderful conundrum for our larger family at the time. We launched Iowa City, Clear Lake, and then we had, I'm trying to remember them in order if I can, Bondurant. So then over time, we've had upwards of 12 that have launched, 8 that are currently active, 2 that have become campuses, Ames and Iowa City, and then 2 that are currently on pause, kind of wondering if there's another season for them down the road. And that's the nice thing about this. It doesn't take a lot, but it is volunteer-led. So there's a time where it just isn't the right season for our volunteers, we can pause because there's another option. They can go back to worshiping online together. But the hope is that they would eventually become a community that thrives.
Yeah. And I think that clarification is good because a lot of us maybe have heard about local sites, on 360. It is very much a part of the Hope Church vernacular now and the terminology. So what I'm hearing you say is that if you were to just look at where the local sites were, you'd be like, why those locations? What you're saying is people have reached out to you. They've said, why don't we have a local site here? I can help lead those types of things. And so that's the thing that kind of is the instigating factor with that, right?
Yeah, it has to start with them. I don't want to look at a map and just point and shoot and say that's where we should go, because not that isn't a way you can do church planting, and that isn't it is actually a way that people have planned for churches for years. You identify a space that could be great for church. You hire somebody to be a mission developer, is often what they're called. They'll go into that area and they'll work hard to knock on doors, no different than what Mike did when he first started Hope. I mean, that's exactly what mission and starting churches really is. This is just a different way at it. I'm not saying it's better than, it's just different. And it starts with the people. We allow people to be the church, and then if it thrives and grows, then we can discern with them when that time will come to elevate that into a campus level with staff and other things. But that isn't always a given. In fact, that's not even the point. The point is really to allow people to be church and then allow God to do what God does. And if it grows into a place where it can become a campus like Ames and Iowa City have, that's a great thing, but it isn't the goal that I hold out in front of all my local sites. Like, you're healthy if, because that isn't really the point. In fact, the Bible's very clear, wherever two or more are gathered, I'm there with you. Now, they didn't call that church, but it was definitely a glimpse of what church can be. It doesn't have to be, a couple thousand people at 9:30 on a Sunday morning. It can be 30 people in a community room at the YMCA in Forest City on a Sunday at 9:30. It can be 25 people in a golf course clubhouse room in Kansas City on a Sunday at 9:30. It can be 60 people in a theater in Newton, Iowa at 9:30 on a Sunday morning. It's just a variety of ways to be church together. But it all starts around somebody reaching out to us. And then we go through a discernment process. This isn't just if somebody says, hey, can we have a local site in? And the answer isn't immediately yes. The answer is, let's talk about that. Because I want to discern with these folks. Not only are they at a place where God can do something through them, because this is not easy. I mean, Dan led a site with his wife for years over in Iowa City, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's not who's going to show up on Sunday. We're showing up on Sunday. It's definitely a lot of work. So we don't want just anybody doing this. We want to make sure that these are folks that can surround themselves with others that are healthy, that are wanting to bring Jesus to their area. And so that process from the initial question to launch can be anywhere from 4 to 8 or to as many as 12 months. And there are times, honestly, where I've had to say no to folks because it isn't the right season. We just discern that over time. Or if it's just, frankly, too far away. I try and plant these now within a drivable radius, and that's a little nebulous now because Kansas City is 3.5 hours from my front door. That's about as far as I really, really, truly want to go because I really value being in person with them as often as I can. I describe myself in a lot of ways now in my ministry like, and this is not, please, just go with me for a half a second. If you read the scriptures, when Paul comes on the scene, and he plants all these little churches around the region, and he writes these letters to them, and longs to be with them, and longs to want to spend time with them, that's how I see myself now. I've got all these churches we've started away from Hope, and my time now is spent not only shepherding them, but trying to get to them as often as I can. So, like I said, I was just in Forest City last weekend. We had a wedding, which was kind of fun. 2 weekends ago, I was in Kansas City hanging out with them. We got a really cool, fun opportunity to maybe do a storefront space that we could utilize on a more frequent basis. The 2 weekends before that, I was in Clear Lake to do confirmation for a couple of kids that went through our virtual Power Life program with their leaders up there. A couple weekends before that, I did some baptisms over in Panora. And this weekend, I'm going to go hang out with our site in Indianola on Sunday morning. So I'm on the road a lot, and my back shows for it. So
well, and I think it's important though to acknowledge that there is this thought process and our desire to be in person with these people who are digital.
Yeah.
It's not us just going, hey, yeah, sure, just watch it online so we can count you amongst the numbers.
Right.
No, we're desiring relationship with them. Now you've seen local sites look a lot of different ways,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So conceivably, it could look a ton of different ways. There could be a lot of different characteristics because there's so many different people. What are a couple of uniting factors of what makes local sites work?
One, I would say big is that they get to be the church. So, for example, I tried to, but they weren't home, unfortunately, bring some communion to a shut-in in Forest City as I was leaving town on Sunday. And regrettably, they weren't there. This woman has got brain cancer, and it's not going well for her right now. So she's just not able to get to church. So I dropped by anyway, but it didn't work out. But the nice thing is, I could call my leaders there and say, hey, she wasn't home when I stopped by, but go ahead and find her this week. So they're able to be the church. If there's a care issue that comes up, it isn't one of us on our pastoral team here at West Des Moines dropping everything to show up and be present. It's the people. doing that, which is so refreshing. And it's almost by design that has to happen, because they live a full, as many as 2 hours to 3 hours away from here. Not that I wouldn't drop everything, and I have. I've been a part, unfortunately, of some very tough situations at our sites. But I really want the folks to be the church and to show up and to care. Not different than, the folks that are in your small groups here on Wednesday mornings. If one of them is hurting, you reach out because you care for them. These are the people you're doing life with in that smaller microcosm of things. That's the same way. So we want to be able to show up for these folks where we can. So that's the first piece, is that they get to be the church. Secondarily, it's a strong word, but I really strongly suggest that our sites get involved in mission in their communities, because they are inviting people to come into a virtual experience. It's not what people are used to in small towns. They're used to brick and mortar, where there's a pastor there that they can shake a hand with at the end of the service. This is a different style of ministry. So really, truly, I feel like what their hallmark is as a site is the ways that they impact their communities on the days that they're not meeting for worship. So each site, in their own way, has found a mission component within their communities to sink their teeth into and to try and make their communities a better place. And that has been a wide-ranging things from Forest City took on the YMCA football and basketball programs, where the leaders came to them and said, our families are really frazzled. I mean, if you can imagine, if you've ever had kids and you've had to chase them around to different events, in small towns, those kids aren't just involved in basketball, just the one thing. They're involved in multiple different things. So these parents were frazzled. They're like, man, we can't feed our kids. We're just running from thing to thing to thing to thing. And it feels like we're just shoving food into our kids' bodies. So our site reached out and said, what if we fed the families? What if on those nights you had practice, all you had to do was bring your kid and we'll give you a grab-and-go supper to take with you when you left? And it changed a lot of things for these folks. They're like, whoa, what do you need this? What do you need for this? Nothing. We're just here so you can not have to think about supper tonight. So they've been doing that for a number of seasons. And I could go around, but I don't want to waste too much time. But each site has a really cool and unique way that they're taking on mission. Because if you can imagine, they don't have a lot of overhead. They're not paying for staff. They're not paying for all those things that go into being a brick and mortar church. So they have money in their giving to be able to dedicate to missions. So their percentage of missions is, even at a small local site, is starting to be a lot like that 50-50 that we're striving to be as a church here in West Des Moines as well.
So, would you say that it's fair to say that the places kind of you've seen God move in local sites is through the various leaders in the way that those folks in their local communities, they asked for the local site. They're leading on their own. They're loving people well in the absence of some massive church staff. They're loving people well and showing up for each other.
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing is these leaders who weren't really leaders. They had, jobs for, whatever their profession was outside of church ministry. They weren't professional ministry folks. And yet God laid a call on their heart, and now they're leaders. Reluctant in some cases, but they're leaders. And it's really cool to see what God does through them, especially when those cool things happen that you can only point to God for, where a family comes in, they want to have baptisms, and those baptism Sundays are just a joy at the site level, because they don't happen. Around Hope, we have baptisms every weekend, and I'm not saying they aren't special. They're amazing. But it's just become so much a part of who we are as a church here in West Des Moines that if we didn't have a baptism on a weekend, I think that would feel funny. Yeah. Whereas in a small town, when you have a family that comes in and they want to have their kid baptized, that's huge. And so it's just really great to be a part of those moments and see God at work in them in the ways that they care for one another.
Yeah, I was just a part of one for my sister's family. They're in Panora, and so I got the chance to go out there for the first time. Shout out to all the Panora folks. I know they have a guys group that's been meeting, and if they end up seeing this, shout out to you. They did such a fantastic job, and one of the things that struck me as somebody who was preaching and baptizing that day, but also had never been there, the way that the intentionality with which they set stuff out they had a kid, it was, it's in a bar and grill downstairs, but they had a corner set up for kids. Okay, you got kids, here's a corner with this cute kids carpet. It's got all these toys for kids. They have all these coloring books. They have all these different things. I mean, it was so intentionally done for families and people. And my family felt so welcomed. You know what I mean? Just to be able to come in and to do that, and you could really see the heart and the intention behind it. And, you know, that's not different than what we do here on the weekends. You know, our
Right.
hospitality team. The heart that beats behind it is a lot of the same thing.
It just on a different scale. I mean, around here we have to be a little more intentional with our hospitality because we're expecting a lot more guests. It's small town. Like I took a picture of this weekend because I wanted to prove it to folks. Our Forest City site still does their Sunday treat sign up on a piece of paper, on a table, right when you walk in the room, and it's handwritten. So I could tell you next week is, you know, the Matisons, or the next week is the Hopples. You know, it's just, that's the way that they roll. And last weekend we had bacon wrapped little smokies. I mean, that's not terrible. So along with fruit pizza. So when you're smaller, you can have better treats. That's one of the things I tell them too. And also I really stress to them, do better coffee as well, because coffee is the third sacrament for Lutherans. We have baptism, communion, and we have coffee is the third one. So do better coffee than the regular urns of mass consumption coffee that we have on a regular basis around here. No, yeah, exactly, you coffee snobs. We're not talking like, they're not doing French press or all like the pour over stuff up there, but we're talking a little better percolator.
But if you would like to host,
Exactly.
a local site at a fancy coffee shop.
Yeah. There it is.
Mark.Bradt at HopeWM.
Well, that's just it. These can pop up anywhere. I mean, I think that's the future of this. So if you consider a local site a worshiping body between online viewer on the couch and campus of Hope, that local site's right in the middle. What we're really starting to pray into now is there something between that we can do? Because if somebody comes to me and says, I want to start a local site in Indianola, let's just take the most recent one, that begins that 4 to 8 month process. Well, what happens in that meantime? Or even more so, what happens before that? You know, is there an opportunity to start something in a smaller way that doesn't take as much support, even as a local site, but allows people to be church just to see if it works, almost like a test drive, if you will. And so we've been sort of kind of very quietly promoting some watch parties that can happen that are kind of a precursor to becoming a local site. So Indianola was our first one that had started as a watch party in somebody's office. They had a large conference table that could seat around 20, and they would get together on Sunday mornings. They did that for about 2 years before we started the conversation about being a local site, which actually shortened that launch process by quite a bit because we already had a team built in of folks that considered it their church home. And now we've got a site in that's kind of one of those little worship parties starting in Grand Island, Nebraska. There's a family that used to be here in West Des Moines that relocated out there. Greg Mangold, I know he's on once in a while for this. He's down in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So we've got a little group that's over on the kind of the southeast side of the Phoenix metro that gets together. And I'm sure we have a couple more that are happening that I'm not aware of. And then there's also the partner churches that we're working with now, churches that are utilizing some of our resources. We've got one in Pennsylvania that takes our sermons on Sunday because they were a small dying church that needed a pastoral presence. And they found us online and they reached out and said, can we just take your sermons? We've got a worship group, but we just need the messages. And so we have a church that literally does their own worship time live, and then they stream Hope's messages on Sunday mornings from New Tripoli, Pennsylvania. And that's kind of fascinating and fun too.
Absolutely. So a lot of different ways that this can look, and a lot of beautiful ways in which God is kind of working through this ministry. Mark, thank you for being here this morning.
Absolutely.
Really
Thanks.
appreciate you.
If you ever want to swing through or you're ever driving in these areas, I encourage you to drop in.
Absolutely.
If for no other reason than to meet the folks and encourage them, because they need that. It literally is like a small house church, and when a guest drops by that's a part of your family and you're a part of their family, they just think it's the best thing in the world. You'll be famous. All you have to do is say, yeah, I worship in West Des Moines. They're like, you do? What's it like? Is it cool? Do they have neat lights? I mean, I'm being silly, but that's truly how it feels sometimes. They just really love the connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we pray for you?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Lord Jesus, we thank you, God, for this day, and we are grateful for our online and local ministry. God, thank you for the ways that you've been working in various ways, God. Before, there was immediate and strong need for a ton of online presence with COVID. God, you were already working behind the scenes, not specifically for COVID, but you saw people that needed hope. We mean that in the sense that we as a church were able to come around them, but they need the hope of Jesus. They needed to be connected with their Creator. And God, I thank you for the privilege that it is that when they needed that, you used us. God, that's such a privilege. And I would pray that we would continue to be able to do that. And God, I pray just as we want to do that in our own ministries, God, I pray that we would do that individually, that we would embody the things that we do around here in this building. I pray that we would do it outside of that, knowing that the church is not localized to just Jordan Creek, Parkway, but instead, God, it's wherever we go. And God, I just pray that we would see the need for that. God, I pray that for health and safety and encouragement and a spirit of joy for Mark and the rest of his leaders as they continue to do new things. God, you conquered death. And so it's a fantastic way that you are conquering the new challenges in our new world with technology. And God, you're using it all for your good, and that's just the type of God you are. So God, I just pray for Mark, for his leaders, for those considering going to a local site. God, I pray that they'd get there, and that they would feel welcomed, and that they would see the heart behind it all, God, because ultimately we believe that heart is yours. We thank you, Jesus, and we love you. It's in your good name that we pray. Amen.
Let me say one last thing really quick before you do that, because I saw Tracy Schmidt in here earlier. He might be in one of the groups that's out there. Anyway, if you have a church, like the relatives church that's somewhere, I have a heart for these smaller churches that are not doing so well, that maybe don't know that there are resources out there that can help them. To put a postscript on that church from New Tripoli, the denomination told them they should close. They said no. And now they're thriving. They just had another church join them, and they're they started their preschool again, which they had to close. And God is up to something really amazing just because they took that faithful next step. If you have a relative who's in a small town whose church isn't doing well, maybe they don't even have a pastor right now, and they're having to get, Jeff to drive in every week from 2 hours away to bring a message he wrote 3 years ago, I would much rather connect them to something that I think could be a little more meaningful for them. So encourage their folks to reach out so we can begin that conversation as well, because it doesn't have to just be some folks that are connected to Hope Online that are doing things in small towns. It can be churches that have some wonderful people that want to continue to be who God has called them to be, but just need some help doing that. So please tell them to reach out.
Can you help me thank Mark for being here this morning? Yeah. Per usual, I have some discussion questions for us. Where have you worshiped before? And what I mean is, where are the various ways that you've done this? I don't mean in the sense of, so instead of Sunday morning, you can do this. I'm saying this to play the advocate, heaven's advocate in this case, the Lord's advocate, to when you go on vacation, guess what's still there? An opportunity to worship with hope. When you are on that trip, when you are on the road, I got a message sent from a friend the other day. They were driving back from something, and he and his wife were streaming the service, and they were making fun of me for something I said during announcements. But they were worshiping online as they drove back from something they were doing. Our schedules are never getting less busy, and so this is our attempt in being able to meet you where you're at as well. So that's my question of where have you worshiped before? Well, what have you found that's worked for you as you've had a busy season of life and maybe not have been able to make it here in person, but what's a meaningful way that you've been able to connect online, and maybe what are some practices to be present in that moment? And then who is someone that you've always wanted to invite to church, but haven't gotten the opportunity to get them in the building? So, it's too far away. I actually live down in Indianola, and now, West Des Moines is pretty far. Well, guess what? A local site Indianola is something that people are really, really excited about. I'm saying there's likely a local site near them. And not only can we just tell them to show up, we can connect them with a leader. We can do a warm handshake. We can do one of those things. So my question is there anybody just in your heart, in your life, that you've always wanted to get here, but it just hasn't really been feasible? This is a way that we could really help people out. And then when you're in the building here, Are you taking the time to connect with others? This is my calling people out thing of like, we go, well, no, I don't. It's obviously not real church if it's not here in the building. And then people walk in this building, don't talk to another soul. They sit down, they walk, and they're like, man, I'm so glad I did real church today. I'm going to challenge that completely. Church is what happens when you show up for your community and those around you, right? We have some folks in local sites who are way more connected to Lutheran Church of Hope than somebody who has been coming for years and they're this close but they're missing it simply because what they're doing is showing up and receiving but not living with, not showing up, not volunteering, not connecting with the people around them because they show up with their barriers on. They're like, I'm just here to hear the really good worship, hear Mike preach a really good sermon, and then head out the door. My question is, are you taking the time to connect with others? There's always ways, and there are always Sundays where the answer is no. For all of us, right? We get really busy with stuff or we get challenged, and I know I'm running a little bit late today, but I think this is really important to say, right? The answer is no for all of us, that we sometimes mess this up. My question is, how can we break down those barriers for ourselves? How can we take a second when it's time to greet someone, really genuinely introduce yourself to someone else that you've been sitting next to for the last however many seasons, because we all sit in roughly the same place? What's a good way to connect with somebody, and are you taking the way to do that? Sound good? So just some good questions spurred on by our conversation this morning. We're super grateful to have Mark here, and throughout this series, we're going to have more leaders coming in and talking all about where God is at work. But thank you, friends, for being here this morning. We will see you next week. Grace and peace. Go be good to each other, and we'll see you soon.